Calvin Fornwald, what a pleasure this is to have you captured here for just a little while so that we can play catch up. Cal, you retired in 1991.
Yep.
And what I just learned off camera a moment ago was that you have not stopped. You continue to work and teach in the evening school. You continue to do a night school.
I do my night school and I do my summer school. It's a way of keeping in touch, though.
But there's been no break for you.
Oh no!
Once you retired.
Well, I'm not truly retired.
You're incredible.
I was away from day school.
You're away from day school. That's wonderful. I am very, very impressed, sir.
No, well,
the energy level required of that. Well, okay. Let's go back. What got you into teaching in the first place? How come you decided to teach?
Yeah, that's a funny story, John, because that goes back to 1948.
Okay.
The year I graduated from high school. I had decided then I wanted to teach, and I won a big $25 award for most promising student for a teacher. Back $25 was a lot of money back then. Yeah.
But what had led to that award? Who had influenced you, or what had influenced you to know that at that age?
Well, that had to go into family. I had a stepfather who denigrated school because I was rather bright, thank God.
Yes.
One of the blessings. I didn't have to work hard, but that was his way of putting me down, if you will. So my response was to just do better, and I even tutored my own siblings, my sister, half sisters, half brothers. It was a his, hers, and our family. So it was half brothers, half sisters, step brothers, step sisters. I actually ended up tutoring them, and it just made me feel good. That was my revenge. You know how a kid is, and I got even with him. But in the long run, I
got even with him for the subtle put downs.
The put down of getting good grades.
Oh, I see.
So I ended up helping his kids get grades. And it was,
and finding out that you had an ability, you had a talent for that.
And so I decided that I was going to teach. But it took a long time because I didn't actually go into teaching until 1965, I guess. When I graduated from college, I went to work for the college, Inter-American in Puerto Rico. And I taught 2 English classes on the side, and then I was the admissions officer. So it was a very interesting bit, but it wasn't enough for me. So when I got bored there with administration and came back here, and I had ulterior motives too. The schooling system leaves much to be desired there. And I could not afford to send I had 2 children at the time. I could not afford to send them to private school. So I decided I would come back because the schools here are much better. And which is what I did. And then I got a job here at Brentwood High School.
But I want to go back. When you got out of high school, you knew you wanted to teach. You knew you had this.
Right, but I didn't have. I left home when I was 15.
Oh, I see.
And in so doing, I went to live in the city. We lived in the country. I went to live in the city and put myself through high school from my sophomore year on.
Where in the city?
This was in Wilkes-Barre, and we're talking about Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
And we had lived in Mountaintop, a little tiny thing up there. So I got a job as a dishwasher. And then back then, even though I was 15, there was no such thing as, you had to have papers or anything else. I mean, if you could work, you worked.
Yes.
And
what years would we be talking about now? Depression?
Talking about 45.
After the war.
45, 46, 47, 48. And because it was my sophomore year of high school that I went and I put myself through. But then when I got done, I didn't have the money, and there were not the opportunities for scholarships then that there are now. And also, you had to be aware of them, and no one would who wanted to help this,
And you were really on your own.
Oh yeah, and then along came the Korean War.
Uh-huh.
And that's what got me into college, because I spent 2 years in Korea.
Were you drafted, or did you?
I was drafted.
You drafted?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I'm not.
Yes.
I am not. I can wave a flag, but I'm not gonna shoot unless I have to.
Yes.
But I really struck it lucky, because I got in just as they were hurting for counterintelligence.
Ah.
And so, because we took the IQ test and I scored well, I was offered that after I finished my basic, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Fort Holabird and did the course.
And where is that? That's not in Kentucky.
No, No, I went to Kentucky, Fort Knox, for my basic.
Oh, I see.
But then I went to Fort Holabird in Maryland, which is right. It's in Dundalk, which is out on the Cape, and I think it's still there. It's the counterintelligence school. And went there, and then I was sent to Korea. And most everybody, of course, says, "Well, war is hell," and that, but it wasn't. I had a hell of a good time, because
you didn't see any. You didn't see.
Oh yes, I saw action, but I was sure. I was across the lines. I would take agents across the lines.
Oh, gee.
But it was. See, when you're 22, you're immortal.
Enough said. Yes.
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 All right. You wouldn't get me. You wouldn't get me on the boat to go there now, much less walk across the line. But it was. It really was. I enjoyed myself immensely, and I learned a great deal, because you realize you're taking a boy from the hills of Pennsylvania, and who knew about the so-called, quote, Japs. Remember, I had just gone through the war, and I was so amazed when I got there and they weren't yellow.
Yeah.
Why look, they brown, it was, and it's amazing how naive we were in those years, because I went, when I got to Japan, I wanted to get a haircut, and I wanted to get a shave too, but I was afraid to let him shave me for fear that he would cut my throat, because I was an American.
This was on R&R on leave when you were...
No, when we first got there.
Oh, when you first got there.
Yeah.
You went first to Japan before you went to Korea.
They sent you.
Okay. Oh, yes.
It was just, when you think about it now, I find it hysterical, but it was very real to me at that time. I mean,
sure. Well, the stereotypes are created.
We had, all we saw was what we saw in the movies, those awful people.
And in the cartoons.
Yes. Everything was, negative.
Demonized.
Yes. And it was a marvelous thing to find out differently, because I met some good friends when I was on R&R, and I made some good friends in Japan, Japanese people, very fine people, really. And
then when you were released from the service,
I had
about 52.
52 exactly. I had my GI Bill in.
Yes. Okay.
So I was in Pennsylvania, and then I started at Penn State, and took 2 years there at Penn State, and then got restless and decided to come to New York. And I moved to New York City, that is, and that's where I met my wife, my second wife, actually.
Okay.
And when we got married, first thing she said is, "You're not going to waste your head. You're going to school." And she insisted. And it was through her efforts that I got my degree. And of course,
isn't that great?
It was, well, she's a great lady.
Well, that was a profound piece of advice at that point. You mentioned before you didn't have any role models in the family that were teachers before you.
Oh, no.
What you had was the experience of discovering that you had an ability in that way, and then with the encouragement from your wife.
My wife is the one who pushed me.
Wonderful.
And I love her.
Did you finish your graduate as well as undergraduate as well as graduate work down at University of Pennsylvania?
No.
Penn State.
I went to Penn State for only 2 years.
For 2 years.
When I came to New York, then I took 1 year at Brooklyn College, and then we moved to Puerto Rico because we had a son, and he died at 4 months from Highlands membrane disease, about the same time as President Kennedy's child.
Oh my!
Lost.
Yes.
They lost. If you recall
Yes, I
that he
do.
lost we lost my son at just about the same time. And my wife was so devastated. I said, "Well, we've got to get out of New York. I mean, there's just much in memory and so forth."
Yes.
So we had a choice. We could go to Pennsylvania or Puerto Rico. So we chose Puerto Rico, and when we got there, I finished at Inter-American University, where I did got my undergraduate BA, and then I got my master's in education at the same school. Of course,
Are you bilingual, Cal?
I was. Let's say that.
I was going to say,
yeah.
To spend the time in Puerto Rico.
Oh yes, I spoke the language comparatively well, and I could get through. Mm-hmm. But like everything else, if you don't use it,
absolutely.
and yes. I lose it. Yeah. I still catch some of my students when they start to chatter, and I catch the words, and then I let them go, and until they've dug themselves into the hole, and then I lean over and I say something to them in Spanish, like, "Yo puedo entender," I'm able to understand, and they do. That's grand.
So it's wonderful. That's wonderful.
It's a dirty trick, really, but it's funny.
It's cute. What I am always amazed at, and once again, you bring me back to it, is how the paths of all our colleagues have come from such disparate sources all over this country, all over the world. And we somehow all have been brought here to do what we did and do. I asked you what got you into teaching, and you've answered that question. Teachers don't have it any easier today than we did in many respects. But I want to ask you, what was the most difficult thing that you had to deal with on a daily basis while you were full-time day? Over the years now, we're looking back
I suppose it was, in many cases, the lack of support from administrators. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had some good support from some of them, and some of them did not back you at all, which made it very difficult because they knew that if I took someone down there, because I rarely did, I handled the situations in the classroom or in the hall, if you will.
Yes.
Tom O'Connor and I were much the same in that. Mm-hmm. And so when I sent someone to the office, I felt they should understand that, this is really a last resort. And if they, when they didn't back me, it was disconcerting.
Yeah.
I mean, because they just, it seemed to me on so many occasions that they would, for instance, you break up a fight between two kids, all right, and both kids get suspended, yet the one kid all he was doing is defending himself. Yeah, why should he be? And so you talk to him, but the school says no, they have to. It's so stupid, and it used to. It would happen to kids that could ill afford it. They
invariably,
and I guess sometimes it seems it broke my heart in a sense that my empathy was with the children.
Of course, I think by the time you retired from full-time day school, you had earned the reputation of being the consummate professional, the master teacher. And on the one hand, I am in awe of your resilience that you continue to teach in the evening and in the summers, using your obvious gifts for kids. I am in awe only because I know the amount of energy that is required to continue to do that day.
Oh, yes, but John, the reward is so much greater.
Yeah, talk about that for
it is just so, out of the, when you're in day school, out of the 200-300 kids you see a year, if one comes back, just one. Well, let me tell you, I had one really exciting day. This all happened in one day. I got a phone call from the office. They said the ex-student was there, would like to come down and talk to me. And I said, okay, fine, because I'm free next period, so let him come down. So he came down, and we went in the English book room. We were talking, he was saying, and he said, I came back to tell you, he was in the Navy, he's in uniform. He said, I came back to tell you that you were right, that I could do better than was doing. He said, you always yelled at me. If I got a 90, he said, you could get a 95. He said, I'm going to school now in Illinois, in Chicago. They had the nuclear school there. Mm-hmm. That's what he was going. And he said, I'm working hard. He said, but I always think of you. And so I said, well, it was really nice to know. It made me feel good. I get another phone call. There's a lady on the phone, a teacher, a mother who wants to talk to you. Plop, 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 down to the office. I got on the phone and the woman says, I don't even remember her name, but I remember she was so excited. She said, you have my son in night school. My son is dyslexic. He has never read aloud in class, ever. And he comes home and tells me he's reading for you. She said, I don't know what I can do to thank you. And I said, it's just was part of the game that we played. And I was pretty far off the ground then. Just before I left, another student came in.
This is all one day?
This is all one day, John.
Wow. And
he's a karate expert, and I had him in night school, but he has his own karate school in Lindenhurst. But he came back to tell me that I had gotten him hooked on Shakespeare in night school, and that when he went to the University of Illinois, he actually went on stage and did Shakespeare, and he had to come and tell me this. And I said, when I walked in my home that day, I must have been 12 feet off the ground, because my wife said, what are you so happy about? I said, you're not going to believe this. And then I told her what had happened. Yes. But and that's the kind of thing. I mean, it doesn't all come on one day most of the time. But these little kids drifting back in saying, I'm taking psychology because you really made me think about that. And I liked it. And, I'm really enjoying it in the college. These are the kind of things,
These are the comments, and this kind of an observation, I think, is very important for young teachers to hear. People who are just beginning to teach or are early in their career, of all the good stuff that they have to look forward to, because it is true, as has been said, that a teacher never knows where their influence stops. That
yes, it's true.
We affect eternity.
Yeah.
Now, were there any teachers that you can remember from your early experience, either in elementary school or secondary school?
I remember
that have touched you.
I remember my freshman English teacher, a man by the name of Stoker. Uh-huh. And he was known to be the Diablo of the department. Everyone was frightened of him. You could walk by his room and you never heard a sound. No one ever talked in Mr. Stoker's class. But he was such a hell of a teacher. He was so good. And he had a way of letting you know without that was good. He just had a way of doing it. And there was a girl in the class and myself who were competing. 1 week she'd have 100, and the next week I'd have the 100. That kind of thing. But he never took favorites either way. But he, I always said I wanted to be a teacher like him, and I turned out to be just the opposite. I can't be strict in that sense. I can get kids who don't do anything for anyone else do for me. I know I've had kids who, would come to my class 8th period, and they've cut the other 7 classes, but they came to my class because they enjoyed it. Right. So that, is always good feelings. But it's better feelings when you get both these kids who hate school, and you turn them on to whatever it might be. Right. Shakespeare, just poetry. Poetry is always, because boys, they hate this. But I've had kids come up to me and they'll saddle up to me this big lummox, and he'll say, would you read this? But don't tell anybody. Yes. But it's you got them. You got them. Yeah, and that's a good
and it doesn't
feeling.
Matter what the hook is, but as long as you get him, that's it.
And you got him, and he's gonna he is gonna let his son write poetry, and he's not going to make fun of him. You see?
Exactly. And there's the change.
Yeah. And that's where, he's not going to go to college, but he's going to give his kid the chance that his dad didn't do for him. Because his dad, he would never be able to show poetry to his dad because that's not manly, Yeah. But he's going to, if his kid wants to.
There's the effect on eternity right there.
It's a humane thing, and I think it's marvelous. I love it.
You're continuing to weave your magic in the evening, thank goodness for all of us. You mentioned to me before when we were talking that the reason that you retired was because of the incentive that was offered. Primarily, that got you thinking about it.
Yes, well, because I was close to the end there, too. And
how many years service did you ultimately have?
I had 20. I had 24, and then they gave me 3, so that was 27.
Okay.
Because I came in I guess it was 68 or 69. Mm-hmm. After a while, the years run together, as you know, John.
Yes.
Oh yes. It does seem,
Yes,
you think back. I know it's happened to you. You run into students, and they're bald.
That's correct.
And you say,
Yes.
Because you don't feel that old.
That's right. That's right.
How could they be bald?
Yes, exactly. Well, did you always teach English, Cal, at the high school level from the time that you arrived in the district, or did you have other assignments along the way?
I taught English, but I am qualified to teach social studies too, John. So I used to teach social studies in summer school. I would teach one English and one social studies.
With certification in both areas.
Yes, I'm certified in both. Mm-hmm.
But primarily, you served as an English
all the way. Teacher, yes, basically.
Right? And when you retired from full daytime, that's what you were doing at that time. Are you doing any social studies now?
No.
Okay. What do you do for fun these days?
John, I'm a voracious reader. I'm doing all the reading that I never had time for before. All those papers that I had to take to correct, I don't have that anymore. I have 2 sets of papers, basically a night. My kids get a quiz and an essay in night school. So that that's 2 hours of work there. That's it. And the rest of the time is mine. And my wife is now, I have to find someplace to sell the books because the books are piling up.
I know teachers who have said, never get rid of anything. Save everything. Even if you have to put a wing on your house, save everything. And I follow that advice. Oh boy, what a mess it is.
No, I've got to, because
you have to lighten the load.
Yeah, well, I read maybe 5, 8 books a week, John.
Oh boy!
I mean, they love me enrolled in books.
Oh my
I come waltzing in.
What kind of reading do you
everything?
Like? Everything.
Whatever strikes me. I mean, I'm obviously I read the bestsellers too. I read Grisham too. I like him. I've done the Coons bit and the King bit, but I also do biographies and autobiographies, and I pick up books on psychology, which is a favorite subject of mine too.
Have you ever had a desire to write any of your thoughts? Or
I have a family who spend their off moments saying, "Dad, please sit down and write." And I'm still helping. I have a little adopted granddaughter, if you will. She's in 11th grade now here, and I work with her. She's in the honors program, and I work with her on some of her essays and stuff. And she's saying, "Pops, you gotta write this. You gotta sit down and write." But I don't. I guess if I sat down, I probably would. But I mean, I'm more interested in reading someone else's than my own.
Yes. And you're still very, very busy. Why did you choose to come to Brentwood when you did, Cal? I mean, that was a buyer's market for teachers in those years.
Yeah.
Was it not?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, one, because my stepsister lived here. So I came out. And then 2, because my brother-in-law knew the superintendent of schools then. So if you remember the Pizza King.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes.
Well, that's how I got my job.
Okay.
He set it up, and I was interviewed by Warren Swenson's brother, the one who went into BOCES.
Ed Swenson.
Ed,
Yes.
yes.
Uh-huh.
All right,
Oh, he just alone, by himself, at Central you were interviewed then. Okay.
by him.
Uh-huh.
And of course, then they were crying for teachers because 7 new teachers came in that year.
Yeah.
Into the department.
Do you remember the interview particularly? Were there any interesting questions that were asked?
I remember that the reason I know that the reason that the interview ended very quickly was because the year before I had been working in the city in a dropout school for dropouts, a private school who handled kids who couldn't handle days, the regular high school. And when I told Ed that I had taught The Return of the Native by Hardy to these people,
he was impressed.
He was
yes.
impressed. That was really that's when the interview ended.
Okay.
Actually, it was over.
Mm-hmm.
He said,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah," and
Okay.
I had the job.
Wow.
But
That's great.
hey,
Now those were in the days of Lou Nannini. Is that
that's right.
That's the superintendent.
That's the
at that
superintendent
time.
I was talking about. Yes.
Do you remember what Brentwood was like when you first arrived in it? How it might be similar or different from today?
It's quite different. It was truly a small community then. I mean, you can leave your car open tonight. You can leave your front door open if you went to the store type thing.
Yeah.
All of which is long since past.
Rural America.
Yes, it was. It was much like being back home in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
All right, very small.
Or in a time warp, I
Yes.
suppose, if you went back to the 30s or the 40s.
Yes,
you could do
that's
that
really
also.
that's where
Yeah.
I think that's what influenced our
Yes.
poor friend Yankowski.
Yes.
Stan, I don't
Yes.
think ever
We both-
came out of the time warp.
We both had the experience, and in some ways it was a joy, and in some ways it was an education of working with Stan.
I loved Stan. I truly did,
Yes.
because one thing you could tell, you could talk to Stan and say what you want to say. I mean, I know once he walked in on my class because a girl had come in. She was late, but she had a late pass and she threw it. And he stuck his head in the class as I was teaching and said, "You know that girl was late?" And I said, "Yes, Stan, I do." All right. And when my free period came, I went over to his office and I said to him, "Stan, don't you ever enter my room without knocking again." I said,
This is the principal
Yes.
of the high school.
Yes, but I told him I would not have it.
Yes.
I said, because you interrupted my class. She had a pass.
Yes.
She came in, dropped her pass on the desk, did not interfere with the class,
Yeah.
just went over and sat down. And the class kept going. And he broke the spell.
That's
And the man apologized. Now, I don't
you
think
wouldn't get that kind of an apology from others.
No, not from any of them. Except perhaps Gabe Gengler.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I had an excellent rapport with Gabe. I mean, we had our ups and downs, but I mean, when he was wrong, he would say so. You know?
It's interesting how I remember what we're talking about now takes me in another direction. I remember that for a good many years, it was almost an advocacy relationship that teachers and administrators had. It was almost that we didn't share the same reality. There were two different realities.
Yes.
And the perceptions, depending upon what side of the line you stood on, really affected how you related, how you dealt with situations and problems. I would hope that has changed today. I mean, you're still involved, so you have an administrator now in the evening that I suspect is a joy to work with.
She is.
We're talking about Charlotte.
Charlotte, yes.
Yes.
She
Very different perspective.
Oh, yeah.
But then again, evening school is different from day school.
Well, it isn't because there are rules and they are adhered to. There's no games.
Okay.
All right. 5 absences, the 6th absence, you're dropped. Period.
Consistency.
And that's the thing that Charlotte has that the other day administrators did not.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they play games, constantly with, you cannot treat this kid one way and this kid another. And they did. All right. Because if this kid's mama's pressured him, then they, ease off. This one's didn't, so he got the shaft. You can't play like that.
You worked with Gilda Manton for a long time.
That's the sweetheart of Sigma Chi.
Yeah. Tell
what a
the
wonderful
people who are watching, who the name Gilda Manton means nothing to a lot of young people today.
What a wonderful lady. I mean,
now Gilda was chairperson.
she was the chairperson of our department, but she was the epitome of a lady, and yet she would never turn her back on her teachers. I saw her, you know, she would go like a tiger at anyone who dared to say anything or demean her staff in any way. She was what a lady.
She was a bright lady too.
Very intelligent, and she knew how to handle people. I mean, we were a diverse department, you understand.
And a large department.
Yes.
At the largest, I think, 23,000 students in the district, so that the English department.
She was, but she,
what, 30 people maybe at one point?
Yes, and she knew how to handle each of us. Each of us had our own little quirks, which she knew how to handle, and she just, they don't make them like that.
Yes. Yeah,
I mean,
what a wonderful thing to be able to have said about you after you've left your mark, because Gilda left a mark on all of us who worked with her. I think.
Oh, mark, yes.
Exactly what you said. Who else do you remember from those early days? That hasn't changed about the system. There it is.
Yes, there it is. Ross
Herzog.
Yes. Because Ross came in the year, he became chairman the year I came in.
Emerson Rasco too.
He came in, I guess it was then. And yes, he came up from the junior high as chairman. And I remember that he and Tom Campy was such a terrible person in the first department chairman, in the first meeting we had.
Tom Campy you're talking about?
Yes, Tom, because Tom did not get the chairmanship.
Yes. Okay.
And Ross had. And he just picked and picked and picked. So I was really very angry by it. And of course, that Friday, we all went up. We used to go up to the country club then. That's when they when they initiated the new teachers.
Yes.
So I had gotten up there early with Martha Dummican. I don't know if you remember Martha. Martha only worked here a year and a half, but she was a piece of work.
Okay, yes.
But anyway, we got up there early. So I had a few drinks, and Tom comes up and he puts his arm around me and he says, "Hey, how you doing, buddy?" And I turned and used some rather floral language to tell him that I had no use for anyone who would not give a person a chance. And that's what I felt he was doing to Ross. Tom and I never really, even when he was department chairman, he stayed away from me. He didn't bother me.
Yes.
But I never really trusted the man. I'm sorry.
Well, because you spoke the truth. I mean, you spoke what you felt, and there was.
Well, he should. I'm an easygoing person, John. You know that.
Absolutely true.
You should not rile me.
But you also don't necessarily play the kind of political, political games that a lot of people came to expect.
I can't do that.
What? Well, I was going to say the assistant principal in Ross Building was a lady by the name of Burl Knott.
She was here only 1 year. She retired the year. Yeah, she was retired the following year.
Okay,
and Fred.
And Fred,
dear Fred.
Yes. What are some of the Fred stories you have? Because that you could.
Well, Fred is still working in night school.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Oh, bless
Fred
his heart.
He is still shuffling through those halls.
Oh my goodness! And he's teaching. What is he teaching?
I think he's doing the prep for the RCTs or something. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, something like that.
Yes.
But I mean, it's amazing. But being, he was only here that 1 year. The following year, we got our new friend, Mr. Jankowski.
Yes.
But Fred was still night school. And Fred used to do observations in night school. What a piece of work. Things like the third shade of the windows was not even with the others.
Oh, yes.
And
I had a few of those.
Yes. I mean, it was just,
well, again, we spoke before about the people that we worked with who came to Brentwood with their minds still set in the 1930s or even earlier than that. and who expected teachers.
Well, when we got, I remember, you had to wear a suit and a tie.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
there was no way out. You had to be dressed.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, today I can go to night school in jeans and I can go like I'm dressed.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Were there, outside of the classroom work that you did you ever do any kind of extracurricular work?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me what you did. What were some of the other projects and some of the activities you were involved in?
With Vinny, we were
Vinny Carnevale.
Yeah, we did the student council. That was a bit of duress. They wanted to put some pressures on the students at the time, which is Izzy Rivera. Back that time, the
Activists,
radicals,
the activists,
very radical, and
students for a democratic society, and
Right.
Stony Brook University, and
and they thought if they got two new people like Vinny and I, that they could control us. Of course, they made a mistake.
yes, okay,
more often than not, we found ourselves siding with Izzy against the administration,
yes.
and but I mean that was, and I also did the yearbook. For
that's right. I remember that.
good many years.
Good many years.
Yes.
Talk about time-consuming endeavors.
That is the least. Well, it's the most gratifying, but the least. I don't know what to say. I mean, I find that no one ever. I guess the least appreciated, because no one ever said, "Oh, thanks, our picture was great," but God. If it didn't look good, they came down on you like a ton of bricks.
I would imagine it's sort of like being a board member. There's always.
Oh well, I
somebody
loved it.
ready
We
to take
did
shots.
The 1 year, Rick Edward and I were doing it, and inadvertently we left out the Board of Education. Well,
Oh boy,
they were livid, but it was funny. It was funny
dear.
because they just, how could you,
Do you have copies of all of the yearbooks from the ones that you worked on? Or
I think I do up in my attic.
Yeah, because it's when these things take on a different value is when people have their class reunions.
Yeah.
And then suddenly those works become very, 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 very important.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I had a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Eric Poquette came to visit me. All right. If you remember Reggie,
I certainly do.
His son, who was one of my
Reggie was an industrial arts teacher
Yes.
in the Ross building.
a tough old bird.
Even before the Sonling building was there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And but his son, in the 70s, he graduated,
Mm-hmm.
and there was I think it was the class of 72, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
74. But they were a favorite class of mine, and he stopped in my house to see me, and it was so nice.
Oh, that's
he's working for one of the major oil companies. I'm not sure whether it was Exxon or Mobil once, but in Jersey anyway. But he's doing very well.
You remind me, Cal, that many teachers do have a favorite year or years. They look back and they say, there was something about that
particular
magic,
group.
that
Yes.
particular group.
Yes.
And I would love to find what it is that happens that everyone has in common.
I
because
don't know.
There is
Yeah,
a chemistry that happens.
there is a chemistry with those kids. So, like there was that year was the Rodriguez boy. Oh, what was his name? We called him the Streakin' Reekin because that was the year streaking was in, and
yes.
and he streaked Dunkin' Donuts,
Oh, great.
and so we called him the Streakin' Reekin. Yeah, and there was the big boy from big Spanish boy from the Dominican Republic who was a wrestler, and he was. But I think that there were about 5 of them, 5 guys that hung together, and one time I heard them talking. They were kidding. They were at 7-Eleven. They were buying beer, and they were going to go driving around. I said, "Listen, if you're going to drink the beer, come over to my house, sit down and drink it, and then go home. Don't go driving around the streets."
Yes.
All right. So they did, and I ended up being the Friday night special. They would bring their beer there to drink. But I felt that they were safer there
You bet.
than they were out on the street, because that's what they were drinking beer and driving around. And I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, of course.
And so I used to take taxi.
There are many people who have told me that they would never want to live in the community where they taught.
And I would
They
never
wanna get
want to
away.
live anyplace else.
That's obvious from what you're saying.
Yeah, no, because I mean, how do you keep in touch then?
Yeah.
I mean,
Did you have students dropping over or coming to talk with you at home?
Yeah, I had. Frequently I would have some who would. I even had some who, when trick or treaters would come to my door, and it was funny.
Yeah. Well, see, I can appreciate and relate to what you're saying, because I would think that would be a real advantage in terms of a rapport that you build also with students.
Well, yes, and you know
what
what
in the towns, being part of an extended family almost.
right, and you know who you're dealing with then.
Yes.
All right, as opposed to, I mean, if I were working in Port Jefferson, it's another story. But you have to live there to know the people. And my own kids went through the schools here.
That's right. How many? All four.
Mm-hmm.
Name your children for us so that this becomes part of our record here.
Ruth Maria,
Mm-hmm.
then Juanita, then Alex, and then Javier. Oh, yes. Everyone remembers Javier. Javier was special ed, and he never did graduate.
Uh-huh.
But he did finish in the service. He got his his high school diploma from the Army.
Mm-hmm.
But the others, my first Ruth Maria was my social butterfly, who was more interested in the kid, the nice-looking boy in the third row, than she was in what the teacher was telling her about English. Juanita was my student, my first to go to college and graduate.
Mm-hmm.
She took a degree in accounting. She's worked. Now it'll be 10 years this August. She's been working for the federal government as an auditor and accountant in the for the office, the general inspector's office.
Oh my! Mm.
She's happy. And then my son Alex, he took 2 years at Suffolk, and now he's the telephone line man. And he works in Kentucky for the telephone company.
But now you have a new role. Now you're a grandfather.
Yep. Two granddaughters. One who lives with me. My daughter Ruth is divorced and she's back home. Uh-huh. And my little 8-year-old is with me. Uh-huh. And believe me, it's marvelous.
I'm envious of that. Yes, that sounds wonderful.
I got her. We spend from 3:30 when she comes home from school until 4:30 doing homework.
Yes.
Every day she's got it down pat. So great. She does it, and then she knows it. Yeah, it's a routine. Yes. Then she can watch TV, or then she can go play. Oh, but
terrific. When were you born, Cal?
1929, the year of the crash.
And some of your earliest memories of your life are?
Oh, those are from. It's rather mixed because I don't remember New York. Mm-hmm. I was born in New York City at the Knickerbocker Hospital, but my mother left New York when I was 2 and went to Pennsylvania, where my father was from. He was in the service at the time. Mm-hmm. He was in the Navy. And she ended up divorcing him. And I was out for adoption. So the only thing I remember about the adoption was that they had a car with a rumble seat. Isn't that amazing that I would remember the rumble seat?
Detail, right.
That little detail.
Right.
But my grandmother managed to get that squashed. And I lived with my grandmother then until I was in first grade.
Is this your mother's mother?
My father's mother.
Your father's mother, okay.
Yeah, uh-huh. Who was really my early mother for me.
Really, yes.
Yeah, and I loved it. I loved living there.
There are, I dare say, quite a few people today who could relate to the fact that they were mothered by their grandmother.
Yeah.
That there are a lot of youngsters who have been, because of various circumstances, raised by grandmas.
And today, yes, especially because both parents have to work. It's almost imperative in order to survive.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because they do miss. Like I insisted that my wife, when we had children, my wife worked at a bank, and but she left the bank. My wife never went back to work, but she was a mother, and was her job.
Yes.
I wanted my children to come home to someone there.
Yes.
And that was important.
Tell me about your grandmother. What kind of a lady was she?
She spoiled the hell out of me. And in so doing, of course, caused me a great deal of problems with my stepfather, because when my mother decided that she wanted to take me back, and she had married this man who lived in the country, I didn't want to go.
Yes.
And that I remember distinctly. I remember my stepfather holding my arms and my mother holding my feet as I screamed because they were taking me to the car. I didn't want to go. I wasn't going to leave my grandmother.
Yes.
But
in effect, taking you from the parent that you knew.
Yes. And but then I always managed to get Grandma always managed to get me down there for the summer.
Good. Were you an only child?
No, I had a sister, but she was adopted out. I never met her until she was 18.
Isn't that something?
I met her when she was 18, and I was a senior in high school, and she had just graduated from high school. She was a year or so ahead. And amazingly, we were going to the same high school. We did not know each other because her name was different. She was, and it
sounds like I'm doing a chapter of Unsolved Mysteries.
It was amazing because it was a small town. All right. And we were both going to the same high school, but she was a year ahead of me.
Yes.
And I didn't, know her. I mean, I left school and went to work because I had to go, I was working as a dishwasher and I had to go to work, and I worked from 5 to 12. So school was over at 4 and I had to run for my job. I didn't get to know too many people, but my aunt, my grandmother's sister, my great aunt, heard that she was working in the department store. And so I went there and walked up to this girl and I said, "Are you Dorothy?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "I'm Calvin, your brother." And we then became very good friends. She ended up coming back to live with my mother in Pennsylvania, in the hills. And then she married a man from up there. And she just recently died from, she had a stroke. Well, was she older? Was she older? Yes, she was 2 years.
She was 2 years older.
Yeah, she's 2 years older than I.
Were there any other adults, Cal, that besides Grandma and your grandmother's sister, you mentioned that you had an attachment with when you were young, older adult figures, let's say, that were role models? Or
No, John, because I was a loner.
And learned to be independent.
I learned not only to be independent, but I had learned that if you don't depend on someone, then you can't be hurt.
Gotcha.
And it took me a long. Even today, my wife says, I can't believe that you're the same man I married because you have mellowed so over the years. But I was very, very standoffish with everyone, even my children in the beginning. But it was very difficult.
What a wealth of pain that you brought to the classroom and in working with youngsters.
That's why it was so easy to reach these kids, because I'd been there.
You'd been there, exactly.
And so I knew.
You mentioned briefly when we talked about where you were born and where you went to school. What are the schools that you attended that we haven't talked about? Did you tell me about all the schools along the road that you had some?
In the high schools I went to, of course, were neither one exists anymore. They've all been consolidated. But I started my college career at Penn State with an extension branch in Wilkes-Barre, and I took 2 years there. And then when I came to New York, when I married my second wife, my first wife I married, and we had a son, but I found her with another man, and anyway, be that as it may, that ended very quickly. But my wife insisted I go to college, and so I went to Brooklyn College.
Brooklyn College, okay.
Yeah. And I took about a year there. So I had, by the time I got to Puerto Rico, where I finished, I had just about a year and a half to go. I was, practically a junior. I was a junior, a junior, if you will. So I had about a year and a half, which I was able to do.
You got some water there, Cal, if you like.
Yeah, no, it's.
I thought maybe it's the dust in here that's.
No, I have allergies and.
Oh, okay. In school, what were some of the best or the worst subjects that you can remember going?
Math was my best.
Math was your best.
Yes, and
Where's your daughter? You see, she's.
I became an English teacher by default because when I got to Puerto Rico, Inter-American didn't have a major in math. You could not get a major in math. They did not have it. So I took the English, of course. That was a piece of cake for me because I was competing against people who were using English as a second language. So I just sort of, I cruised.
Yes. Yes.
And I had that, and of course my social studies. And I had some good and some strange social studies teachers. My English teachers, they were all pretty straight, But I had one social studies teacher that I could, bulldoze, and I would nitpick with him to get higher grades, and he would say,
right.
All right, Fornwald, look, I gave you a 97 and that's it. I'm not going to give you another point. And then I had one that the kids used to open their books to take the test, and he never noticed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he put the question, he'd say, okay, now tomorrow, and you're going to have a test. And he'd have 5 questions on the board. He said, we're going to have 3 questions out of here. So we'd go home, take the 5 questions, write them all out, on each one on separate paper, take them in, and whatever questions he put up, we pull those out.
Okay.
And we had it done.
That's great.
We were bad, but I mean, it wasn't difficult because I knew the work. They did it at my house, and we wrote it out. So, I mean, I didn't feel I was cheating. Sure, they were cheating because they didn't know it. I did.
You mentioned Ross Herzog before. Ross got very involved with theater for a while. Did you ever have any connection with any theatrical productions here at school?
Not at school.
I know that I remember Ken Moss, who also was in the department, had almost a reverence for your abilities and for your gifts as a teacher. And I remember he was also involved with theater, but I didn't know whether there was any connection between you.
No, the only theater I did theater when I was in high school. I mean, I was in the junior and senior plays. And I actually fooled around a little bit when I moved into the city. But I never really got involved.
Okay. Yes.
So
during the time that we both worked together, there were a great many changes took place in Brentwood. Some of them were of an almost historical nature, and I wonder if there are any of those moments that you can recall. I'll give you an example. I found some papers today when I was looking through my own archives the day that Robert Kennedy visited the school in January of '68. We've had a tragedy when Robert Wicks took over a classroom. There's another terrible thing that I remember. I say terrible in connection with Robert Kennedy only because of his subsequent assassination. But there were also some memorable trips that I was involved in, and where I took kids on excursions in the days when you did take field trips. And I wondered whether there are any moments or any that you can think.
You talk about field trips, and that brings back a particular field trip. We went to see Romeo and Juliet in the city, into Manhattan, which you could never do today.
Yes.
But we went in, and I took just my honors class, and there was and one other teacher. She had her honors class. I think we had just 2 classes taken in, and I remember because I had one girl who, of course we had read Romeo and Juliet and they knew what was going to happen. But this one girl got so involved, she was screaming at him, literally screaming up at the screen. She's not dead. She's not dead.
Oh, dear, dear. Could this have been the first experience with theater ever?
Oh, it was marvelous.
Yes.
You know, she's not dead. She's not dead. And then, of course, I remember the riots.
Yeah, that
was
talk about that for a moment.
That was scary.
Conrad Follansby's first day as administrator in the R.O.B.S building occurred on the day that he was greeted with a riot.
And it was amazing. I think he handled it well as could be. Yeah. And it was a shame that it had escalated to that point.
The riots, as I recall, they were always treated in the newspaper and misnamed. They were. I don't.
They weren't riots.
They weren't riots. Exactly.
No, exactly. They were not. Yes, kids came on the property, but. And it had started. It wasn't black and white confrontation. It was a drug deal, simple, pure and simple. The fact that one was one was black and one was white had nothing to do with it, and it was.
That's the way I remember it.
It escalated into something beyond that, and you had kids who were going to take matters into their own hands, but they weren't given the opportunity to. The doors were locked. Boom. And Conrad, I thought, handled it well. They herded them off, and the punishment was swift and
turbulent days. When our numbers were up, and I understand from talking with people that the numbers are on the way up again.
Yes, they are.
The district is growing by leaps and bounds all over again. Over the years, they say, I guess from the Freudian school, that there are no such things as accidents. We just don't end up where we are in life by accident, that we bring a sense of purpose, or there is a reason for our being where we are, whether we're aware of it or not. To the extent that you can answer this, what's been your mission?
Well, I know that I could never have worked in another district where it was so structured. I mean, this is back to Gilda, where she gave us leeway to work. And yes, there were you had to do a Shakespeare, but there were openings you were not, in May you will teach Romeo and Juliet, this type of, no. I mean, if you wanted to, there were options. You wanted to teach Othello or Hamlet, Merchant of Venice, we had choices.
Yes.
And there was nothing, you could, if your kids agreed to buy a book, and you cleared it with her, you could do that. Yes. You could. I mean, I know the first year I came here, they dumped an honors class on me, and we were reading Willa Cather's My Antonia, and when they got to the part where they had the black man playing the piano, and they were giving this stereotype of they have rhythm and that.
Yes.
I asked the class, "What's wrong with that picture?"
Yes.
And they said no.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, and at that time, the Confessions of Nat Turner was the big bestseller. So I asked them if they would like to read it. I said, because you think that those slaves were sitting under the apple tree, waiting for the apples to drop and saying, yes, sir, no, sir, massa. I said, that's not true. There were many who revolted against it. And we got the Confessions of Nat Turner, we read it, opened some eyes. Also opened a can of worms too for me. Had one parent call up. Again, Ed was still here. Ed Swenson, and he got the call, and he called me in, and he said, she said it was a dirty book. So I said, well, let me go talk to her. So I did, and I went to talk to her, and she had never read the book. All she had heard was something on TV, and I said, well, suppose you read it. And her daughter, who was my student, when she heard I was coming, she went upstairs. She wouldn't come down. And I said, ask your daughter to come down. So she did come down. Her name was Brown. And she got angry with her mother when her mother said she hadn't read the book and all. In any event, it ended very nicely. But the footnote to the whole thing is that the girl ended up being the salutatorian.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
And the year after, within a month after she graduated from high school, she ran away with a Spanish boy, which, her mother was. But I thought, you see, if you don't leave these kids alone, if you just push them and try to run their lives, they're going to do something. She was on. She was back in Brentwood within 6 months. All right, but she had thrown. Hey, this is my independence.
That's right.
But her mom forced her into it. Why didn't she just let the girl alone? Yeah, no, the girl was handling the situation.
There were many examples of books that were banned for some of those years, books that the library here was not allowed to give out. I remember Stan taking positions on Catcher in the Rye or some other books that were, I don't remember now if that was the one, but there were a number of issues that we've had to deal with that. Do you remember
I know. They had a big to do on I Know How the Caged Bird Sings.
Oh, right.
Yes, Angelou. And that was so sad because it's such a magnificent book.
Sure.
My God.
And look what has happened to her reputation today. She is right up there.
Yeah. But it's just a great book.
Yes.
And it's a rape scene, yes, but it's handled so well that you have to actually explain it to the kids for them to understand that it was a rape scene.
Yes.
And Stanley just went off the wall on this.
Yes.
Gilda, of course, was there, so the great defender. She should have been a lawyer. No one would ever have gone to jail.
What did you make your first year? What was your salary your first year in Brentwood? Do you remember?
Brentwood, 17, I think. No, maybe not that much.
Yeah.
It wasn't very much.
Well, in some ways, we've come a long way, haven't we?
Yes, but
in some ways.
Hey, for what you paid for your education, for what I paid for mine, for what a doctor pays for his, he's making a hell of a lot more than we are.
Yes.
And we paid basically the same thing.
Were you involved at all? This is the 25th anniversary this year of the organization NYSUT, New York State Teachers. United Teachers. Were you involved anyway in the politics of the district through the years? You purposely made a decision to...
I stayed out of it.
Stay out of it.
I thought my job was to work with kids, and that's where I stayed. Mm-hmm. And yes, I crossed swords with people on occasion, but it was only in the interest of my students that I did it.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't, I couldn't care less about that.
I understand. There were moments where, as I made reference before to the fact that we shared different realities, whether it was administrator or a classroom teacher. But there were times when I think after the union became active, after we organized as a union, that there were times when I personally was very happy to have them on my side.
Oh yes, because I was passive as far as the union went. Yes, I would. I vote, if they wanted to vote for a strike, I voted for a strike.
Yes,
but I mean, I didn't get involved. You remember? Oh, Tom. What was his name?
Tom Brush.
Yes, Tom Brush.
Yes.
Now there was a shame that here was a man who was a really good teacher.
He was.
Tom was an excellent teacher
and a bright man.
Yes,
as well.
But he got involved in the politics, and because of it, he got out of teaching, and the kids lost.
Yes.
They lost. The
irony of decisions we make in our lives, though, I remember Cal choosing to become a teacher after having decided not to go into the public sphere. That is, I was going to become a politician, going to public service. Decided, no, I'll teach, thinking that there would be no politics in education. So as a young man, you look back and you realize how naive many of our idealistic decisions are.
Of course. We did come in thinking of ivory tower.
Yes.
But you soon learn that it isn't an ivory tower. But you've got to play it by your ear. You've got to play it by your rules. As long as you don't overstep the boundaries. And my rules were, hey, if it's good for the kid, it's good.
You obviously don't think that you made a mistake becoming a teacher.
No, I love it.
This is an extension of who you are, Cal.
I love teaching.
Yes, yes.
That's why I'm still doing it.
Well, I don't know if there's anything that we haven't talked about because I have bounced you all over the court today.
Yeah, well, I guess we have, haven't we?
And I hope that others are able to enjoy much of what we talked about because I think you are an inspiration. I think the fact that you are still doing what you do so well is an inspiration to all of us, even those of us who are no longer active during the day. And I want to thank you for being our guest today. Thank you for coming in and making the effort.
Oh, Tom, I'll tell you, it was my pleasure. I'm sorry we couldn't make it sooner, but things happened.
Thanks, Cal.
Okay?
Stay.
Okay.
They're gonna fade us out here, and we'll